Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I'm John, this is Miniatruner. Welcome to the Miniatruner 2019 Awards, the most prestigious awards in all of gaming, of course, where I go over my top 10 games of the year. Except this year, there's a bit of a problem, which is 2019 has been a really damn good year for games. So I tried to put together a top 10 list, as I've done in previous years, and I realised I was leaving off some really damn good games that deserve some acknowledgement. So, this year, we're going to be extending it to a top 15, because bloody hell, this has been a really damn good year for gaming. There's been so much good stuff. So, top 15 coming up, but, it gets even more complicated yet, because some things technically didn't really come out in 2019 because games are complicated these days. They come out in 1 year in early access and then come out again a year later on Steam if they're exclusive on Epic for a bit, and then there's DLC campaigns and expansions and remakes and remasters and dilly. So, basically, there's a few games that didn't actually come out this year but did still have new stuff coming out in 2019 that deserve a shout out. So, we're going to begin today with two special mentions for games that have still got some really cool, exciting stuff going on. So, special mention number 1, Total War Warhammer 2, which has had some brilliant DLC campaigns come out in 2019. And I say that in a completely biased way because the race in Warhammer 2 that did the best out of all these DLC campaigns was the Skaven. And I love the Skaven, they're my main race in Warhammer 2. So basically the game made my favourite factions better, so have a gold star. But it's not just that, however, it's not just that. I think Warhammer 2 deserves a bit of a special mention because they've been adding a lot into that game. Like, it's been out for over 2 years at this point, and even if you're not buying the new DLC, they're still providing really big, substantial free updates alongside every single DLC pack. Like, earlier this year, even if you've never bought any DLC packs whatsoever, the Skaven got a major mechanical rework, so they had access to the Undercities. That was available to everybody. Loads of factions have had changes like that. There's been ongoing balance passes. There's a lot of really good stuff. Basically, over 2 years after launch, Creative Assembly has been doing a really nice job keeping that game up to date, adding lots of mechanical depth to it, and at this point, it's one of the finest Total War games ever made. Well done to them. Special mention number 2, Civilization 6, because Gathering Storm came out at the beginning of 2019, and that was a real big revelation for me. Like, before Gathering Storm, hadn't actually played Civilization 6 for a while. Since it came out, I've played several big, slow, marathon-length games by myself. It really improved the game. The natural disasters really spiced up the early game. The World Congress makes the late game much more compelling. And on top of that, they've been doing a really nice job providing some balance changes, tweaks to buildings and wonders and all sorts. Basically, they've just kept polishing the game, making it better and better. So, again, special mention to Civilization 6. Now, on to the main event, the top 15 of 2019. And we are starting off at number 15 with Imperator Rome. So, okay, we're starting off on the controversial side here because, yes indeed, Paradox released a brand new grand strategy game in 2019, set in the ancient period, basically my ideal perfect game, and it's only just in my top 15 games of the year. But the more I thought about it, the more that felt right, because Imperator Rome is a good game, otherwise it wouldn't be on this list. But what it really is a work in progress. Absolutely, it is a very solid foundation. There were things that were disappointing at launch. It just didn't have the depth or the magic of some of Paradox's other games. It didn't immediately seem as compelling as Stellaris or Crusader Kings 2. But they are absolutely putting the work in right now. At the time of recording, there's been, 3 or 4 pretty major updates and content packs, more free stuff yet to go. They've basically put the paid DLC plans on hold to just provide a giant pile of free updates to get the game into the state it ought to be in. So, it's a really damn solid, interesting game. The military stuff works really well. The new food mechanics, really damn nice. Politics is starting to shape up nicely. It's already a good time, and I look forward to seeing how it evolves in future. Number 14, A Plague Tale Innocence. And this game really demonstrates how exceptional execution can turn something that sounds like it shouldn't be a particularly exciting idea into something truly special. Because on paper, A Plague Tale Innocence does not sound particularly exciting. It's basically a stealth game in a medieval setting where for much of the game, you're involved in escorting a child who cannot defend himself and, if left alone for any period of time, starts to panic and draw attention to himself. So that sounds like it should be very irritating indeed, but it works, and the reason it works is because the narrative is so strong. The characters of Amicia and Hugo are really well drawn. You care about these children, as a result you want them to survive, you want them to get where you're trying to go. It doesn't hurt, of course. The stealth mechanics are very polished. They all work very, very nicely indeed. You're never caught out by a guard who sees something that you really feel he shouldn't have seen. It all works pretty much flawlessly. And on top of that, the rats are incredible. Now, I know that shouldn't be a big thing, but the rats are a really big part of the story. So the fact that they look so amazing when they show up really does carry some of the sections. As does some amazing audio design, both in terms of exceptional quality voice acting and just the sound and music when the rats show up. It's just marvellous. Number 13, Observation. An amazing little experience this. This was a very short sci-fi experience that nonetheless is one of my favourite psychological horror games this year. Once again, the setup feels like very classic generic stuff. Spaceship goes dark, the crew is missing, only one member of the crew is left accounted for, and the AI seems to be slowly going a little bit insane and might be trying to murder you. With the really fun unique twist that you're playing as the AI. The main character might be a human who's trying to give you orders, but you're playing as a rogue AI that has very clearly been infected with something, and you're balancing the fact you're trying to do the best you can by the humans with the fact that there is something other and alien slowly taking over your mind, and meaning it's only a matter of time until you have to start doing horrible things to humans who are trying to shut you down. It's a brilliant, different, weird, unique experience, and if you didn't watch the videos, I don't even want to say any more in case I spoil you. Well worth checking out. It's a fairly short experience, all things considered, but definitely worth a look-see. Number 12, Untitled Goose Game. And this is here because it is far more than it actually needs to be, because this game went viral long before it actually came out. It became a bit of a meme, in fact, and it achieved such viral fame, they didn't really need to bother putting together anything more than a barely functional game. It still would have sold, still would have made them good money, but they went well above and beyond what they needed to do. Not only did they make a competently put together game, they put together a really surprisingly solid stealth game. In fact, even though you're playing as a goose, and it's all very charming, and you're in an English village, it actually does feel like a small mini Hitman level. And I mean a good Hitman level, full of all sorts of things you can play with, interesting ways that you can interact with all sorts of items. It is a surprisingly well put together game, and when you've completed it in what already feels like a very satisfying campaign, the game just then surprises you by bringing up a whole bunch of extra difficult optional objectives. Because yeah, this game is basically remarkably generous. There's a lot more here than I expected, and it's a lot better put together than I was expecting too. But yeah, in the absence of an actual Hitman game coming out this year, Untitled Goose Game was the best Hitman game we got. It's fun, it's charming, it's interesting, and it's got way more stuff going on than you'd probably expect. Number 11, Planet Zoo. Now, if any other game in the world told me to spend an hour setting up an enclosure for a couple of tortoises to live in, I would say that sounds like an absolutely terrible idea. Planet Zoo did not ask me to do that. Planet Zoo just gave me the tools to do it, and I chose to do it to myself. I spent that hour building that tortoise enclosure because I wanted to. I wanted to create a good environment that those tortoises were going to be happy in. That's how good Planet Zoo is. Number 10, Disco Elysium, or Disco Elysium. Disco Elysium is truly unique. Truly unique in all sorts of ways. Like, basically in the game, you wake up and your mission is to put some clothes on, go downstairs, and get something out of a tray. And that took me 3 hours to do, because this is a beautifully, wonderfully in-depth narrative game where so much of the narrative complexity comes from your own character. A barely functional alcoholic detective in a barely functional police force inside a barely functional broken down city. And your perception of this richly detailed world is constantly informed by the weird background quirks you've selected for your barely functional detective. Sometimes his rampant substance addiction comes to the surface. Sometimes he comes up with a really interesting insight because he's a detective, or at least used to be. And basically you spend your time stumbling around this world trying to interact with it as best you can. You're an absolute mess of a human, and I love it. And also, one really fun thing, which is, this is the first RPG I can recall playing in a long time where I basically made no effort whatsoever to put together the best or most functional character I could come up with. Instead, just because the narrative in this game is so strong, I just went for perks and upgrades that sounded interesting and embraced the chaos, and it was wonderful. It's a wonderful, unique, and truly odd experience. Number 9 is Shade. Now, another game that on paper probably doesn't sound like it should be anything too special, because Shade is basically a walking simulator with a photo mode, and yet it works. It works perfectly. In Shade, you are a travelling artist, and you just travel around this charming, colourful, lovely land, painting whatever happens to take your fancy. There are no enemies, there are very few obstacles. Basically, you're just wandering around, chilling out, meeting people. Even when you do get missions, they're mundane. You help a frog to build a boat, you help 2 bears to go on a date. But it just works because it knows what it wants to be. It wants to be a relaxing, chilled out experience where you can just settle down, wander around and have some fun. And every time I've played it, that's exactly what's happened. I've left the game feeling more chilled out than when I started. And I do admire a game that knows what it wants to be and executes it perfectly. It's just an absolute delight. Number 8, Control, my favourite psychological horror game this year. Unfortunately, pushing Observation down into second place. Control is wonderful. I was not expecting much from it, but it's very, very good at creating not really a scary atmosphere. There's barely any jump scares in Control. Instead, it's a game about everything just being a little bit unsettling, just a little bit off all the time. Your character clearly has some weird, dark stuff in her backstory that doesn't get explained to you immediately. The building you're exploring is actually a giant sentient monster that occasionally itself seems to have opinions that it has no way of expressing to you. And also, that massive sentient monster building is itself a prison for loads of other weird sentient monster creatures, together with some truly odd dreamscapes, a bunch of characters that seem just a little bit too calm about the madness they're currently trapped inside, some truly messed up puppet shows. Seriously, the puppet shows are absolutely terrifying. The game just constantly nails the sensation of everything just being a little bit unsettling, a little bit off. It's absolutely marvellous atmospherically, though the gameplay is really damn solid too. Fun weapons, fun powers, and a really fun physics engine, so when you send something flying, you really feel like there was some weight behind it. Great little game in terms of narrative, gameplay, and atmosphere. Absolutely worth a look. Number 7, Slay the Spire. Yes, I know this originally came out in 2017, but that was in early access. It actually did launch this year. Now, I'm sure I've been inconsistent in the past about whether early access launch versus 1.0 launch is when we actually count the game as launching, but screw it, if you squint, it is sort of allowed to go in the 2019 list, which is where it's going because it's really damn good. This is probably the single most compelling game on this list. A game which I can happily play for hours, and when I do eventually die, want to immediately start over and try and do again. It just nails a beautiful, beautiful difficulty and learning curve. When you pick it up, it seems like the most easy thing in the world. And then it just adds and adds and adds and gets more and more complicated. Wild, stupid, wacky decks that you put together can work really, really damn well. You can be screwed over by a random twist of fate and then saved by another. It is a brilliant, compelling game and probably the single most played thing on my Switch. It's just fantastic. Well worth a look-see, even if you don't consider yourself into deck builders. This one is something truly, truly special. Number 6, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Now, one of my favourite games from a few generations ago was Metroid Prime. A brilliant game that perfectly balanced exploration, combat, and narrative. And I feel like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is very, very similar indeed. The levels are wonderfully designed. Even though they're massive, if you just walk through them once, you find yourself knowing roughly where you are at a glance. They're that well put together. The exploration is great. The combat when it shows up is great too, because a lightsaber actually feels like a lightsaber. And this is perhaps the best lightsaber I've ever used in a Star Wars game, because many times when you're using a lightsaber, it doesn't really feel like it's an incredibly powerful weapon, yet we know from the films that's what it's supposed to be. In Fallen Order, you really do feel like you are holding something powerful, and something that should rightfully terrify your enemies. Everything about it feels right, deflecting blaster bolts, parrying, attacking, the moves you unlock as you go forward, and it's really, really difficult, but it never feels unfair in the slightest. Never once did I feel frustrated while I was playing Jedi Fallen Order. And as for the narrative, just like in Metroid Prime, it's never really in the forefront. It's just in the background, never really getting in the way and forcing the game to slow down. But what is there is really interesting. Well-drawn characters, good voice acting, a fantastic package overall that lives up to the legacy of Metroid Prime and may immediately be one of the best Star Wars games I've ever played. And I think it should tell you something about the quality of the games that came out in 2019, that ended up at number 6. Number 5, and I know this one's going to be controversial, Pokemon Shield. Because sooner or later, I have to accept that how a game makes me feel is a perfectly valid way of trying to evaluate how much I like it. The thing is, I know Pokemon Shield is a really flawed game in all sorts of ways. It's very easy. The world feels small. Some of the little dungeons in particular feel very, very small indeed, and you can just get through them having explored everything in a matter of minutes. But I just don't care, because Pokemon Shield makes me smile. Every time I play it, it makes me smile. I have a lovely, lovely time playing it. I fell out of Pokemon back in Generation 5, and since then, I've just not been interested. This was the game that got me back into Pokemon, and I don't care that there's all sorts of absolutely legitimate flaws you can list against it. I enjoy playing it. And more than any other game I've played this year, it's a game that I want to play more of. Every time I stop playing it, I think I wish I had a few more hours so I could just keep playing this. It's compelling and charming, it makes me happy, and thus it's going nice and high up on the list. Number 4, and let's just continue the controversy train rolling here, The Outer Worlds. Yeah, I'm surprised too, but having finished the game, this felt like the right place for The Outer Worlds, because don't get me wrong, it's really, really damn good. I would stress this. There's loads I love about it. It's gorgeous and open, and there's so many ways you can approach different problems. The characters are really well drawn and really well voice acted. There's loads I love about the universe, but there's also problems. It's arguably not the best version of itself that could exist, and I'd argue what it is an amazing foundation. The Outer Worlds 2 is going to be absolutely ludicrously amazing, but The Outer Worlds 1 does have some problems. Like, it's a surprisingly small game in some areas, which feels really weird for a game in the sci-fi genre that's very much built around this massive frontier out in the Halcyon system where you can go around and explore. It feels so weird that sometimes you can land on a planet and look around you and see the entirety of the area you're allowed to go into in easy walking distance. It's also really, really easy if you've got any experience with action RPGs whatsoever, even on the highest difficulty setting. It is a complete cakewalk, and in terms of character build, I do feel like you're strangely limited. You don't have any way of boosting your character's base health or tactical time dilation meter, and in the fact there's not a huge selection of perks available, and it feels like actually there's not a huge amount of replayability going on here, because all characters are basically very similar to each other. Again, I'd stress, this does not mean it's a bad game. It's a really, really good game, but it's a flawed gem. The Outer Worlds is fantastic, but 100% there is room for improvement. And when that improvement does show up in DLCs or the sequel, I suspect that is going to be something truly special, and that will very likely be my game of the year when it does show up. Number 3, Wargroove. Now, this one really caused me some confusion, because the thing about Wargroove is, it is by far the least original game on this list, because it is basically Advance Wars 2 with some slight tweaks to it. And I wasn't sure how far I should penalise it for that, if at all. But then I remembered, of course, simply recreating a new really damn good Advance Wars game is not the easiest thing in the world. And we know that because Nintendo themselves failed to do it twice. Dual Strike is fun, but it's also completely unbalanced, and the new units that were added in basically just overcomplicated things. And the less said about Days of Ruin, the better. That game could just go in a hole and be on fire. But then along came Wargroove, who said, you know what, maybe we can make a really good Advance Wars game, taking Advance Wars 2 and, shockingly, elevating it by adding in the unique critical hit system where different units could get bonus damage under certain conditions. They were actually able to add more tactical depth into Advance Wars 2 while maintaining the brilliant visual style, the amazing music, the perfect balance between units, the tone of the campaign. It's just wonderful. And absolutely this is mainly here because this is my list. Advance Wars 2 has a special place in my heart, and a game that can come along, take it, and somehow improve upon it, that gets love from me, but this is well worth a look for everybody. It's the best strategy game I've played this year. Number 2, Total War 3 Kingdoms. Now, the Total War franchise is very, very long indeed, and there are two types of Total War games. There are Total War games that basically say, okay, we'll take what the last Total War game did, we'll polish it up a little bit, we'll add some new mechanics, we'll put it in a new setting, but basically they're just slightly improving on what came before. And there are Total War games that say, screw it, let's just toss out all the assumptions we've been working with for years and try something new. The original Rome Total War was one of those games where they said, screw it, we're going to try something new. And it was incredible. Rome 2 was also one of those games where they decided to try something new. And it had problems and took a few attempts and improvements before they were able to polish that into something really, really damn good. Three Kingdoms is one of those games, where they toss out plenty of established stuff and try some new stuff, and it's wonderful. It's been such a huge improvement. It is a revelation for the Total War franchise. The new character-led diplomacy system and relationship system is amazing. It adds so much to the politics and diplomacy of the Three Kingdoms campaign. I felt emotionally attached to random characters the game just generated for me because they had lives, they had partners, they had friends, they had rivals, they had enemies, they had people that they'd met in battle before, they'd made friends and enemies while they were off in the world doing different things. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. It didn't hurt, of course, that the combat was incredibly well balanced, arguably the best balanced Total War since Shogun 2. The setting in China was absolutely beautiful, artwork and music was spectacular. A new recruitment system that had been tested out with a few flaws in Thrones of Britannia came over to Three Kingdoms in an evolved and improved form, and it was brilliant. It was just absolutely brilliant. And on top of that, a brilliant foundation on which to build subsequent Total War games. So basically, this game has made me even more excited for the future of the franchise than I already was. Between Three Kingdoms and Warhammer 2, Creative Assembly have just been knocking it out of the park this year. Absolutely spectacular work. But even so, it wasn't good enough to be my game of the year. And that leads us to number 1, Outer Wilds. And the more I thought about it, the more I realised it couldn't be anything other than the Outer Wilds. The Outer Wilds is something truly special. It's also one of very few games that really get something very, very important about sci-fi exploration games, which is they've got to feel big. If you're going to tell us to go and explore, you've got to let us go and explore. And the galaxy we're exploring has got to feel huge. There's got to be a sensation of space and speed and loneliness. And this, to my mind, is why Mass Effect 1 is so much better than the rest of the franchise. Because Mass Effect 1 was the Mass Effect game that absolutely nailed that sense of space being a big thing that you were exploring. And the Outer Wilds absolutely flipping nails it by just giving you a spaceship and a solar system and saying, you know what? Here you go nuts, have fun. You won't be getting any quest markers from me, you won't be getting any advice, just go, explore, and figure it out for yourself. The game really treats you like an adult, and you can just go and do whatever you want. There's no loading screens around the edge of planets. Everything is all connected. You just take your spaceship somewhere, land somewhere, and explore. You scout from the sky to look for something interesting. You land next to it. You check out what's there, and you're always rewarded for it. You'll always find something fascinating that makes you want to play the game even more, to learn more about its secrets. And it really feels like your adventure, because the game takes a total hands-off approach. You can go wherever you want, do whatever you want, and the game locks nothing away. If you understand the universe well enough, you can probably complete the game in 5 or 10 minutes or something by just going to the right place and doing the right thing. The solar system is just there for you. It's just the most beautiful, intricate, well put together toy that you get to play with on your terms. It's wonderful. It's just wonderful. Every single thing about it is awe-inspiring. I don't think it's in any way hyperbole to say that that game is awe-inspiring. I look at it and I think, I'm lucky that I'm able to play this, that I got to experience this. It's wonderful. And I'll be thinking about it and remembering it a long, long time into the future. It'll take me some time to figure out how I feel about it in terms of my favourite games of all time ever, but I suspect when I've had some time to think about that, Outer Wilds will settle somewhere into that list of my favourite games of all time ever, somewhere fairly high up. It's something so special. So special. Like plenty of the games I've mentioned previously, go and check them out, absolutely. They're solid games, but Outer Wilds, that's the only game where I feel comfortable saying, if you don't play this, you have missed out on one of the most well put together, memorable and important video games that has existed in years. It's something so special. There was no doubt for me whatsoever this should be my game of the year. There was no debate. It's that damn good. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Miniatruna 2019 Awards, which is, yes, I suspect perhaps a little bit on the controversial side this year. I suspect some people will not entirely agree with my rankings, but you know what? That's fair enough. There's no real objective way to rank games. That's my take on it. If you've got a different one, good for you. I do hope you've enjoyed the list, and I hope you've enjoyed the year in general. It's been a good year. It's been a good year for the channel. I think we've done some really fun stuff this year. So, yes indeed. As it comes to a close, I do hope you've had a lovely time watching our videos, and I do hope you decide to continue doing so into 2020. That would be absolutely flippin' marvellous. But in the meantime, I've been John. This has been Many a True Nerd, and this has been the Many a True Nerd Awards for 2019. Thank you very much, and goodbye. You know, I really hope we've agreed open borders with Japan, by the way. Otherwise, they have basically just invaded. I may have picked the wrong fight over... Yep. And my cities, of course, have got even more flipping high-tech, though mysteriously still completely dependent on, you know, an aqueduct. Now, I'm not saying your entire army is mostly already dead, but it kind of actually is.